All right, everyone. Hello and welcome to the 2021 Pacific Seamounts Expedition. It is an exploration of Canada's only known and deepest seamounts and the life that depends on these underwater mountains.
Yes, welcome. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping notes for everyone. Your audio has been muted and videos turned off, and we have set it up so that only the hosts will be on video.
So we want to hear your questions today. So please click on the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And then when you get to this screen, type your question into the box and send, and we'll do our very best to get through as many questions as we can today.
This broadcast is brought to you by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, Council of the Haida Nation, New Chalmouth Tribal Council, and Ocean Networks Canada.
Okay, so we have several hosts with us today. I'm Jennifer, and I work with Ocean Networks Canada, and I'm joining you from the traditional territories of the Wasanich peoples. Sabrina.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sabrina Crowley. My new channel name is Hu Yik, and I'm from the Ho-Chukilsit tribe. And I'm the Southern Region Biologist for the New Channel Tribal Council, Uwathluk Fisheries Department, here in Port Alberni in the traditional territories of the Hupechesit and Ship2Shore First Nations.
Jared.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jared Dick. My new child's name is Wes Wissenup. I come from the Hupechesit First Nation, and I'm joining you from the Hupechesit and Ship2Shore First Nations traditional territory. And I'm the Central Region Fisheries Biologist for the New Channel Tribal Council Fisheries Department, Uwathluk. Thanks.
And Heidi.
Hello, my name is Heidi, and I work for Fisheries and Oceans Canada. I'm part of the deep sea ecology team trying to provide support from land, and I'm coming to you from the traditional territories of the Wasanic and the Loquen-speaking people.
Lais. Do we have a Lais? Lais this morning? Can we hear you?
Oh, sorry. Good morning. My name is Lais Chavez, and I'm a marine biologist working with the Council of the Haida Nation. I live in Haida Gwaii, Haida Territory, but I'm joining you today from the Unceded Coast Salish Territory, the city of Vancouver.
Wonderful. And Monica.
Yep, I'm Monica. I work with Ocean Networks Canada, and I am also joining you from the traditional territories of the Wasanich peoples.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. And joining us from at sea are marine biologist Dr. Cherise Dupree and Tammy Norgard. Cherise, Tammy, can you introduce yourself? We might have to wait until later.
Yeah, I got it now. I think.
Okay.
Oh, no, you can hear me. Sorry,
Yeah.
It was my mute. Okay. Hi, everyone.
Wonderful.
Everyone, I am Tammy Norgard. I am the lead scientist out here at sea on the JP Tully. We are about 150 kilometers offshore. We're quite a ways out here. So we'll hear more about looking forward to your questions, and you can hear more from us at the end. And Dr. Cherise Dupree is just over there managing our actual annotations and collection of data. In the background, we're actually working right now. So this will be happening while this is going on. So looking forward to this. Thank you.
Wonderful. Fantastic. All right. Monica.
Yes, very exciting. We have for this live event, we have several schools joining us from Haida Gwaii, Cayucut, Stinemuk, Sechot, Hopichesit, and Li-Kwa Tai territories. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, so for our broadcast today, we're going to give a brief background for the Pacific Seamount expeditions, answer some of your questions, or all of them, if we can, and using the Q&A function, you will have the opportunity to ask questions of the marine biologists who are right at sea right now on this ship, which is called the JP Tully.
This is very exciting because species are part of working parts of the natural system that provide essential services necessary to sustain life. For example, they provide oxygen, food, nutrients, habitat protection. These are really amazing species and creatures.
Absolutely. Okay, species loss, you may have heard of it. It's called extinction, and it's a natural part of our planet's history. However, recent rates of species loss are much greater than the natural rates of species loss, and they're primarily caused by human activities that cause overharvesting, pollution, habitat loss, and climate change.
Luckily, we are working on MPAs, or marine protected areas. These are areas of the ocean that are protected from things like fishing, mining, boat traffic, oil and gas exploration, and they can help reduce the loss of marine species. Canada is committed to protecting marine species, and to help achieve this goal is considering the protection of its seamounts. And of course, seamounts are very important to our First Nation partners. Lais, Sabrina, and Jared, can you tell us a bit about why seamounts are important to your community? Why don't we start with Lais?
Okay, hi again. Well, the Haida people, they have a long understanding of seamounts, thousands of years to be more precise. So you have an idea. In oral stories passed down through generations, you can hear about skankinkas, which is in Haida language means supernatural being looking outward. And in this oral tradition stories, it's mentioned that back in the day, when the flat top of skankinkas was above the waves, a colony of puffins rested on the back of the supernatural beings. Skankinkas represents a very shallow seamount of the coast of Haida Gwaii, but it actually forms a group of three seamounts. So as you're going to hear today, a lot of marine life is found around seamounts, including whales that pay a visit from time to time. In this rich life encountered on these seamounts described in Haida oral traditions. Nowadays, the Haida Nation, together with the federal government, they take care of these seamounts to ensure these unique and fragile ecosystems protected. So a marine protected area was created in 2008, and it's the Skankinkas Bowie Seamount Marine Protected Area. So it's very important for the Haida Nation to protect the seamounts.
Thank you very much. Sabrina and Jared, would you like to add something?
Jared, did you want to do this, or do you want me to answer?
You can go ahead and I'll add in after.
Okay. Well, seamounts, they are their own unique communities. They provide not only an environment but also provide food to the sea creatures in the ocean just by how they're shaped. So First Nations, they have lived along the coast and have utilized the sea resources around us for thousands of years for food, bartering, and also like more present day just to earn a living. So I think it's just important to understand that everything has a role in the environment, contributing to life and stability, and seamounts are one of them.
Thank you.
Just to add to that, as the biologists were saying, that these seamounts, the way they're situated in the ocean, there's increased productivity associated with the seamounts, and that this increased productivity through the connections of the food web also translate into increased productivity of the stocks that the Nuu-chah people rely on. And so this increased productivity equals increased production in the foods we eat and that we survive on. So they're a very important function in the ecosystem.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. All right. So let's just talk a little bit about what these seamounts are. So seamounts are inactive, submerged volcanoes that are at least 1 kilometer in height. That's really big relative to many of our local mountains. and they're biological hotspots. As Sabrina and Jared and Lais were talking about, they are biological hotspots. And what does that mean? That just means that there's more life that lives on and around the seamount compared to the surrounding ocean. Monica?
Sorry, it's my first day. I missed that button, that mute unmute button. I have to practice a little bit. What I wanted to say was seamounts in turn attract marine mammals, seabirds, and fish who use the seamounts as a feeding and nursery ground. These systems are all connected. Sabrina, would you be able to tell us a little bit more about this, please?
Yes, this is just like a good example of the new channeled principle, Hishakashitsawak, meaning everything is one. So seamounts, they create this unique community, bringing a lot of different sea creatures together in an area, working together in this environment. So Hishakashitsawak fits well of how seamounts operate.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I love that, working together. Yes, absolutely. All right, so we had a question come in from one of the classes, and this one is for you, Tammy. How does a volcanic eruption affect the sea life?
That's a good question. So first of all, these volcanoes are hundreds of years old, so they're extinct volcanoes. But as we know, in Hawaii and other places, there is actually volcanoes that are erupting and the lava is flowing to the sea. So obviously, it's very catastrophic during the eruption to the sea life. But what it really does after is when these volcanoes cool and become large mountains at the bottom of the sea, they become oases of hard rock in an area where there's a lot of mud in the abyssal plains. And in these hard rock is where all kinds of sea life can grow. And you'll see behind me, we're in an area full of all kinds of corals and sponges on top of this hard rock on this extinct volcano.
Thank you very much for that. So hard surface for life to live on. Fantastic. Monica.
All righty. So this question I'm going to ask Lais, actually. Have Indigenous communities visited seamounts in the past, and what purpose did they serve for them?
Yes. Well, as ocean people, the Haida have historically traveled far distance in their canoes, especially for trade with other nations along the coast. But as I mentioned before, these oral traditions reveal this connection with these distant seamounts. So I'll just try to tell like a story that I heard about this connection with the seamounts. So it's a story about two brothers that set out to find an island that they hear about. And so the story goes along a dispute between the Haida village and Nisga'a village. And in that dispute, a high-ranking man's wife got killed. So during this mourning period and spare, this man lost everything, including his wealth. So his children took it upon themselves to bring back their wealth, and they heard the story of Puffin Beak Island. So their goal was to collect puffin beaks to establish their father's wealth. So during the journey, there was a puffin hat, a puffin that came and grabbed the boy's hat and took it off in one direction. So these boys decided to follow the puffin. They only see fog for the longest time, but could hear all the puffins making noise. So they got a glimpse of the puffin that took the hat. As they paddled, they bumped into some rocks and they stepped off the canoe. They discovered they actually made it into the Puffin Beak Island. So as they filled all their canoe with beaks, they thought about how happy they were and how they were going to look good after they bring the beaks back to the family. So once they got home, everybody had a big celebration. And once they found out that the brothers found the island, they were like super thrilled. So they were able to restore their family's name and share the wealth, establish their family status. So they showed in the story that how they were aware of like this island that was above the waves. So it's a really interesting story showing how they already had this connection with seamounts.
I have never heard that story, and that is fascinating. The puffins, I want to go visit them there. That's amazing. Thank you for that story, Lais. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so the only known seamounts in Canada occur in the Pacific Ocean, and they're shown on this map here in the yellow triangles. And a lot of the seamounts occur right off of Vancouver Island. And this is part of the reason this area is a proposed marine protected area. Making this a marine protected area would protect those seamounts and all of the life that they support. It would be the biggest marine protected area in Canada. Now, to effectively protect and manage this area requires an understanding of what is there, because quite simply, you can't protect and manage what you don't know.
It would make sense then that the mission of the Pacific Seamounts expedition is to describe the location and physical characteristics of the seamounts. So where are they? And DFO is working with BC's coastal Indigenous communities to help name these newly discovered seamounts, which is really exciting. They're also there, of course, to describe species, their abundance, and location with a robot called Boots. And I did see there were some Boots-related questions, which is really great. Boots is a robot that is relatively small, and it doesn't destroy the animals or the seamount. It allows for observations of species and behavior. It's a great way to just take a look. So related to this is this question: how did the Nuu-chah-nulth community members become part of this expedition? And I'm going to ask Sabrina if you'd like to provide us with some insights.
Jared, did you want to? You would.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. So Tammy Norgard at the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, Canada, approached our boss, Eric Angel, in the lead up to the 2019 expedition about having two Nuu-chah-nulth representatives partake in the expedition. And then after we sent out an open invitation for Nuu-chah-nulth community members, which we sent out using our social media channels and through our capacity building coordinator, we found Joshua Watts, who is actually my cousin and who is an ocean and atmospheric sciences student. So he showed some interest and he came along. And then this year, though, due to COVID restrictions, which are limiting the number of people aboard the vessel, there are no Nuu-chah-nulth community members on board the expedition this year. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so previous Pacific Seamount expeditions have been successful. They have discovered at least 40 new seamounts and provided detailed images of these underwater mountains, just like this one here. And Sharice, Tammy, we have a question about the technology that's used to discover these seamounts. And the question is, how does Boots communicate with the boat?
That's an interesting question, because it is actually a fairly complicated system. We started out with the idea of just having a camera on a string, and that became a much more complicated camera because it has to go down to quite deep and be under a lot of pressure. So what it actually communicates with is a fiber optic cable. So this cable is 2 kilometers long, and it reaches down to it attaches to Boots. And then later, when I pan around the lab, you'll see it attaches to our 30 computers. I think it only takes about 8 to run it. And the cable, the fiber optic cable, is actually a glass tube running all the way from the bottom to the top. And in that glass tube, it sends signals to these computers, and it sends us the image of what we're seeing on the bottom.
That's pretty exciting. And I mouth mubble. So always got some mouth mubble. Previous seamount expeditions have identified many species and identified their numbers and sometimes behaviors. And this is really important to creating an MPA, but it also helps us understand human activities like fishing. Heidi, we've actually got a question about the sea life species. What kind of life have you noticed, and are there any new species yet?
That's a very cool question. There have been so many discoveries in the deep ocean. It's fantastic. So we actually know more about the surface of our moon than we own our own deep oceans. So during these expeditions, we're often seeing things that have never been seen before in sense of where they are, their depth distribution, how they interact together, that sort of fun thing. But right now we're working with a camera. So he comes down and takes pictures. And so we try to identify who is living there. That's always what you're trying to figure out, who's living there, how are they interacting, how are they using this space. But sometimes, some years, we actually have remotely operated vehicles that have collecting capabilities. So we can take a snip of a coral, or we can take a little piece of sponge. And when we have that, they can actually bring it up to the surface, and that helps identify a lot of these species. A lot of these species, you have to look at really small features to be able to kind of confirm exactly what it is you're seeing. And so some of these, yes, we've seen before, but some of them are brand new to science. So for example, a lot of our glass sponges were worked on by a researcher named Dr. Henry Reiswig, and he did incredible work and has identified at least already previously 4 new sponge species to the seamounts, and there's already an additional 6 underway of being described. We found new coral species, and even this really weird a parasitic zoanthid, which is kind of related to corals, and it overgrows other things and smothers them. So those are just some of the exciting new things that have been found. And with these collections that are made, they're able to deposit it into museums. So from our last collection, they went into the Royal BC Museum, and now they can be researched and looked at for perpetuity.
That's really cool. It's amazing that those will be explored by our future scientists as well.
Mm-hmm. And it's amazing that these have never been seen before. And we have the technology now to go down to the deep sea and not only see them, but maybe even see how they behave, which we haven't been able to do in the past. So this is really groundbreaking work. Amazing. Okay, so while previous expeditions have focused on shallower seamounts, this expedition has been focusing in on the deeper seamounts. These are seamounts that are further away from light and have higher pressures and lower temperatures. So let's go to Tammy right now at sea to hear more about what they have discovered about these deep underwater worlds. And before we do that, please keep those questions coming through the Q&A, and we'll relay those questions to Tammy and Charisse. So Tammy, what have you discovered about these deeper seamounts?
So I'm going to actually say something earlier. As you were talking about how many seamounts we have already discovered. And at the present time, just on this survey in the last week, we have confirmed 3 more seamounts. So we're now at 65 seamounts. We were at 62 at the beginning of the survey. So that's one of the discoveries of this trip. One of the other major discoveries is we went to the top of a seamount that, of course, we'd never explored before. And when we got to the very top of it, we found all kinds of eggs, so little eggs from a skate. So a skate's like a large stingray-like a fish, and all its egg cases are there. And they weren't just like new fresh ones, they were piled on top of old ones. So this is obviously a nursery ground that the skates come back to regularly. So that was a huge find for us. Right at the very beginning, we one of our plankton nets brought up a viper fish. And what was so cool about this, we've seen them a few times, but actually getting it live at the surface. It came up very, very deep. We put it in an aquarium. We can actually watch it and study it and look at it very closely. These viperfish have huge teeth, and they actually have a little lure they hang up over their mouths to sort of attract food so they can eat it. We also which is another thing, Boots has lots of cameras pointing in a lot of directions. And while it was going down, we usually watched it go through the water column, and we see squids and all kinds of things. But later that night, when we got up the camera and we were going through all the video from all the other cameras, we saw in one of the videos was this very rare jellyfish that went by. It's called the ghost jelly. And it's the 8th time in 30 years it's been seen. So it's amazing to even see that ghost jelly. Another thing we've never seen before in all of our 4 years of surveys is we came across a whale a whale fall. So this is where a whale falls to the bottom of the ocean when it dies, and then it feeds the life in the abyss. It's food for all the animals down there. And so, that we came across one of those. And of course, we have Boots, and he's being towed by the ship. So we have to go very slow to actually see it, and we couldn't stop. So we just got some quick pictures of it. So, that's some of the things we've seen, but I could show you the lab now if you'd like to see.
Absolutely. That sounds amazing. It sounds like every time you go out, there's something brand new that you learn. Lots of new things. Yeah.
Therese just wanted me to point out that this is the live stream below the ship right now going by. And what you're actually seeing are all, it's a mat of brittle stars. They're just sea star after sea star after sea star after sea star. You can even zoom in a little bit over there, guys. Can we do a zoom in here? And you can see these like sea stars up close moving. Yeah. There you go. So, and we've been on this mat for a little while now, so people in the lab are getting kind of excited because this is something we see somewhat regularly across the seamounts, and finding this piece of information is useful for helping us understand all the seamounts. So would you like me to pan around the lab now? Do you think that would work?
Yes, that would be wonderful.
Okay, let's see if I can do this. Keep it steady. Hey, you guys, I'm going to pan around the lab now, okay? Okay. Therese? Panning the lab. Okay. Just making sure they got all there. I put my mic down for a minute. So in this corner of the lab is where the oceanographers set up all their stations to do the water sampling, and they're testing the oxygen levels in the water. Our oceanographers are asleep right now because they work all night long. So we're the day crew instead of the camera crew. Okay, now I'm going to take you to the camera control area. Okay, so here you go. This is the camera control area. This chair is where our pilot is. Right behind that chair is right in front of there is where Jackie right now is piloting, and she's controlling the camera. Oh, she's waving. There you go. And over here we have many, many monitors and screens. And the one you probably can see the best is the sonar going around and around in front of Jackie. She's got all that red on the sonar means rock. She doesn't want to hit one of those. In the corner over there, we've got control area that Andy's running, and that's actually pretty important because that's actually where it tells us if anything's wrong with Boots. And we're looking for red flashing lights are very bad, so we have someone on that. And there is the famous Dr. Dupree. Say hi, Charisse.
Hey, Charisse. Come on, Tammy, you gave me that one.
All right. Okay. This is Charisse's control station, and that's it.
Station. This is where I have my meals.
If you're actually following us on our hashtag, Charisse is posting her meals right now because that's a big part of being at sea, the yummy meals we get. Okay, I'll bring you back now.
We have a question. This is fantastic. Nice to see the ship. First question is, how long can the ship stay out at sea?
So this ship can stay out for a very, very long time. It can make its own water, which is usually the limiting factor. And so it usually stays out for no longer than a month, but it can actually stay out for a couple of months with the amount of fuel and food and water it can hold for sure.
Well, hopefully you won't be out there for a couple of months. Hopefully you'll get to come home soon. But we actually have some...
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, this crew was saying that the warmer weather, because we don't have warm weather here, is if we keep going south. So they were telling me that. So that could take us a couple months.
That sounds good. There's actually a few more questions related to Boots, and I see people are really curious, so I'm going to group a few of them together for us. One of them is along the lines of, first of all, why is it called Boots? Does it have booties? Is it cute? And second of all is, how long can Boots stay out underwater, working? And if Boots failed, what would you do? So it's a three-part.
Okay, so the name is yell it, Ben.
Bathyal Oceanographic Observation.
Okay, so Boots stands for the Bathyal Oceanographic Observation Televideo System. what we really want to do is call up Boots after one of our retired scientists. So we made a name that works for him. So he was the first person to do this kind of research. And so we really wanted to name this camera after him. And the second question was,
how long can it stay out?
So it can stay out a really long time. The camera goes down and it's just towed by the ship. It can stay out as long as we can pull it for. We only keep it out for 12 hours because we have to have people on station at all times. We have a person standing at the back deck watching the angle of the wire. We have a person on the winch. We have the ship and the crew managing the ship to go very slowly. So it could stay out for 24 hours. At some point, we would run out of the ability to record the video, but we generally keep it out for 12 hours. And the second question was, what happens if it stops working?
Yeah.
So that has happened to us before. We all of a sudden up here, the cameras just would go black. And because it's just really a camera on a string, we just towed it up and fixed it. So luckily it's quite easy to bring back because it's just attached to a cable.
All right, so we have another question here. When did you and Cherise become passionate about protecting seamounts and these waters around seamounts?
Okay, so I became passionate in the last 4 years or 5 years when the government of Canada decided that it was going to set up an area that was for marine protection. And it was one of these areas out here that we didn't have a lot of information. So it was one of the beginning things that we said, we have to learn what's out here. Yeah. And honestly, we started out thinking there were only about 17 seamounts. And so we started a team, and that would be Cherise and I. And Cherise actually is walking in the view, so I'm going to pass it off to Cherise for a minute.
Thanks, Sammy. Hi, everyone. So that's a really neat question. Thanks for asking it. My passion for seamounts came from going out to sea in 2012, not to a Canadian seamount, but into the high seas. And I went to a shallow water seamount. I had only heard amazing stories of the shallow water seamounts in Canada. So I was expecting to see beautiful coral forests and sponge gardens, but unfortunately this seamount was in the high seas and it didn't have the protection, the management that Canadian seamounts did. And so it actually kind of broke my heart to be out there and to see what had happened to these seamounts. And so having that background, having that personal experience of seeing what can happen to a seamount when you don't get to manage it the way that it deserves. When Tammy approached me and said, hey, we're going to put together a team and our goal is going to be to protect deep sea seamounts, I was on board right away, and it has been a phenomenal 4 years of working with Tammy and the team on expeditions just like this. Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you.
Well, and thank you for sharing such a passionate answer. That's really awesome. And it actually kind of goes really nicely into this question. Are there any no-take zones in the question is specifically around Haida Gwaii, but at all, are there no-take zones that we can talk about?
So the seamounts around Haida Gwaii, the three up there are protected in a existing marine protected area. And those are all closed to all fishing now. So yes, that's a no-take zone for sure to commercial fishing. And these ones off here, the one that we're on right now, and most of the ones around us already have a closure on top of them to commercial fishing. So no take for commercial fishing. So there is already a zone. And then once we have an MPA, if that moves in that direction, then we will be working towards a plan to keep them protected.
Yami, is it all commercial fishing? So any type of commercial fishing or just bottom contact?
Good question, actually. That's a very good point. So within this area, it's all bottom contact fishing that is closed. So anything that touches these seamounts or even gets close to them, it's many meters above the seamount is protected as well. Some of the surface, so there's a fishery that does just along the surface, and that one is still open in this offshore area. I don't believe that fishery occurs up in the Skunk-Inglis Bowie area.
I see. Okay. This is a good question. What are all the different jobs on board the boat?
Okay. I didn't get my list over there, but I probably can remember this. I'll start at the very top. There's the captain. And he has his pretty good job right now. He was telling me that his job is to really make sure everything runs smoothly on the ship, and he doesn't have to do any paperwork. But in the Coast Guard, there's a lot of paperwork for his chief officer is the next person in command. So that's his first officer, and he has to do all the paperwork and sort of keep all the logistics of the ship running. Then there's a second officer, and a third officer, and this ship has a fourth officer, and all those people really are out there on the bridge to drive the ship. So I call them if we need to move the ship in any direction. Then there's a crew of able-bodied seamen, they're called, or deckhands, and they're running all the deck equipment. So if we need to move the crane, we call up them, we move the crane. There's a deck boss, he's called the bosun or the boatswain, and he's the first guy I go to when I say, hey, the camera's coming up, bring the crew on board, and he'll run around and get everybody ready to bring the camera back. There is an entire galley staff, so we have 2 cooks on board. And they feed this ship has 2 levels. There's sort of a crew level and a main deck level. There's 2 eating areas. There's the cooks feed both those areas. There's actually stewards that sort of keep everything clean, move all the food around. And those stewards, there's 2 on each level of those. There's a logistics officer who does more paperwork, I'm told. That's what his job is. And then there's all the engineers to keep the actual motor running. So there's 4 engineers on the ship as well. And then on science crew, we can have up to 15 people. And we need a crew that runs the camera. We need a crew that does the data that's coming in right now. And then we have an evening crew that does oceanography. And we'd like to have an outreach crew too, if possible. So that's the sort of the general groupings on the ship. There's a lot of people. There's 34 people on board right now, but we could certainly put a few more on right now.
That is a lot of folks on board. I with COVID, as everybody's experienced, I don't know that I've been in a room with that many people for a long time. So that's pretty exciting, actually. We have a really cool question that I think would be great to hear your expertise and opinion. The question is, what are some differences between seamounts and other kinds of underwater habitats? So what's something that you've really noticed as a difference between, say, a shoreline, an intertidal zone, and a seamount? What are the defining differences?
Yeah, so the seamounts have this, they're dark. So they don't have any algae or any of you guys will walk on the beach, you'll see lots of algae growing on the beach, lots of kelp. You don't have any of that. So even though behind me right now, you'll see something that looks like a plant, this is a coral. And there's no plants down here. So that's a big thing for me. There's also these large corals, which can stand upright and catch food. And we don't really see that near shore or in on the beaches. So that's one of the big things. But it's really the areas around the seamounts that are really quite different too. There's this like abyssal plain, this muddy plain full of all kinds of other kind of life. And then also right beside these seamounts here, not very far from where we are the hydrothermal vents. It's a whole other community that's really unique and very different as well. So does that sort of answer, you think?
That's awesome, but it certainly makes for more questions because there's just so much to explore.
Great. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, speaking of it, feel free to add some more questions because again, there is just so much to ask and wonder about. So don't be shy.
Absolutely. So, no stupid questions ever. This is discovery, like in the making right now. It's amazing. What is the most interesting thing you have done or seen while you've been out at sea?
Oh, Sharice, what's the most interesting thing we've done or seen? Yeah. I'm gonna say the nursery ground, but I'm gonna see if Sharice agrees with me. Got one?
Yeah,
I did hear one.
Did you tell them about the buckets?
Oh no, I haven't. Oh my goodness.
Oh my word. We found bucket lids, but don't be alarmed. We put them there. And we put them there in 2018 when we were here with a remotely operated vehicle that had, that's the wrong hand. You can't see that one. It had hands, and we could take down physical markers bucket lids on ropes and weights, and we marked different sites along the seamounts that held significance. So maybe a site that had been fished, or maybe a site that we knew the oxygen was going to change. And we put them down knowing that if we ever got back to these seamounts, wouldn't it be cool to know that we were looking at the exact same landscape and we could measure, did the animals change? Did the communities change? Did they grow at all? And so Boots isn't the type of vehicle that you would normally go resurvey a site, but we thought, we're here, why not try it? And we did it. We refound these bucket lids, and we were able to collect imagery that now gives us a 3-year time series of how life on these seamounts changed. And that is a first in our waters, and it was incredible. We are saying it is like going to Mount Baker with a flashlight at night and trying to find the Frisbee that you lost. So it was very exciting to re-find our, I call them bucket lids. They're scientific markers that just happen to be made out of bucket lids, but they have shiny tape on them and they are marked with numbers, which makes them scientific.
Thanks, Charisse.
Yeah, not all scientific gear has to be high tech. Right? Okay. Do divers go into the water to explore or just boots?
So divers do not go into the water to explore these seamounts. They're very, very, very deep. So these ones right here, we would just send boots. But if you were at Skunkinkless Bowie Seamount, it is within diveable depths for scuba divers. Just the very top. You just see like the very top edge, and that has happened. There are a few people who have dove that one, but it doesn't give you a lot of time down there to do the science. So these cameras are our best chance at getting down there and staying down a long time to get some good data.
Super cool. I'm going to give you another combined question because I think these ones go together, and there's so much to ask. Because the seamounts are in the dark, you mentioned that before. Are there any primary producers, and what is the main food source for the animals? And related to this, what species have you found at the deepest parts?
So that's an interesting question about the amount of food that comes down. So Charisse really wants to tell her story because this is actually, so we did some really interesting math just recently on how much food is found out here. So it's about the primary productivity. It's quite an interesting one. So you should really tell that one because it's kind of neat.
So scientists love crunching numbers and then comparing them to things that are tangible to real life. And so while the science behind this is very complicated, what we figured out is per square meter of seafloor, so not a very large area, maybe that by that, they get a sprinkling of 71 grains of sugar per day. That's all you get. So that's not a lot of food. I don't know about you, but I don't want to survive on 71 grains of sugar per day. So that food source is from the surface primary productivity. So the algae, the animals, the whales sneezing, everything that like is gooey and at the surface waters, that has to float down through the water column. And it takes weeks sometimes, and it lands on the seafloor. We see it as mud, but the animals see it as their life source. It's called marine snow, and it's how they get all their food down here. I'm glad we have a cafeteria.
So Charisse, those they have to be pretty efficient to collect that material that's falling down, that marine snow. Are those sponges? They have an amazing capacity to filter the water, don't they?
They do. I know that there's some awesome stats from the coastal waters where you find out that a single sponge reef is filtering, Olympic swimming pools of volume of water per day. And so you're absolutely right. The animals that do well down here, the ones that we see growing to 1 meter, 2 meters, even higher, to be able to grow that large, to be able to eat that much food, you'll see their body morphologies are such that they optimize how they can get food. So you see them have all different shapes, but really it's to sieve as much water as they can. So you see the corals will grow out, you know, with their branches out, trying to reach across as much water as they can so that they're filtering the highest volume that they can. You'll see the boot sponges will, depending on how the current is coming, they'll grow in all different body forms to perfectly optimize that. Because if it's the difference between 70 grains of sugar or 100 grains of sugar, it might be life or death at the bottom of the ocean. Yeah, so it's a really good question. You definitely want to optimize how much food you can get. And we see that in the animals and what shape they are down there.
So that's awesome. So that's good for them. They get that food, but they're also at the same time purifying the water, cleaning the water.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is an ecosystem service that these deep sea animals do for us, is that they are pulling lots of things out of the water, including carbon, and the bottom of the ocean really is a carbon sink that helps us with climate regulation. So corals and sponges, we owe you a thanks.
That is really amazing. With those different animals, what are the deep ones that you've seen? So we've got a question here. Do the deep animals, what's the deepest one you've found, or down deep? And then have you had any species that have come up from the deep and been found on these mountains instead of being at the bottom where they normally are?
Oh, that is a great question. So the deepest we've ever gone is just over 2 kilometers, and we got into some animals that you usually see in the bathyal, the abyssal plains. So they weren't seamount animals per se. They were animals that you would see widespread throughout the ocean. Just on this expedition, we saw a ghost jelly. We are the 8th scientific team to see it in 30 years, and it is a deep sea creature that just floats around the world's abysses. So that, I actually think that might be one of the deepest animals we've ever seen, because little is known about it, but it's known just to float around in the depths of the ocean. As far as animals coming up shallow, actually that goes back to the story that Tammy probably told you already about the nursery ground, and that skate is actually a very deep sea skate. And that skate has a really good strategy for having its young. It moves up to the shallows just to create those nursery grounds, just to lay its eggs. And then it goes back as an adult, it goes back into the deep. And it's to them, a seamount is an island. So it went to this island up in the shallows to lay its eggs so that its young can be protected away from predators, often their own species. Then they go back, the adults go back to depth, and they leave their young on this little underwater island. So we do see animals migrating up these seamounts because they use them as nursery grounds.
Thank you. That is really amazing.
Yeah, that deep sea jelly too. How deep are they?
Well, it's a great question. We've seen 8 of them in 30 years, so we don't know too much about them. But in the different locations that we've seen them in, I believe there's no science to say that there's anywhere in the world that they can't be. So we know they're not in the shallows, but I mean, you're talking about, we're at 2 kilometers. The abysses can go down to, 10 kilometers and deeper. And so we just happened to float by one when we had a GoPro going and made a massive contribution to the knowledge by seeing it for the 8th time in the last 30 years.
Amazing. Okay, this is a good opportunity to ask this question. What is your favorite part about your job?
Go to yours. I got to do mine. Do I have to choose one? Oh, come on. I mean, it's the adventure of discovery. We get, somebody gives us a paycheck to go out to places that have never been explored, to find animals that have never been seen before, to document it, take photos, videos, get them in a medium that we can share with the public. And and ask the public to explore with us. So, I mean, that I probably just described my entire job, but that's my favorite part of my job is we're discovering still. And I feel like that kind of gets lost on land. We've invented so many things and we've been to so many places, and you can get on Google Maps and fly around the world and check out, what the beach looks like that you're going to see when you go to Mexico next month for your vacation kind of thing. Like there's very little left that you don't feel like has already been described in detail, photographed. But in the deep sea, we only really know 5%, which leaves 95% of us to still describe for the very first time. And that's pretty special. Tammy? Yeah, let's go.
Well, I mean, the best part of the job is definitely these expeditions that are really exploratory. But I have to say, my job, I'm really lucky because I get to work on marine conservation. So that's really, I spend a lot of my job all the way from the beach to the deep sea, working to collect data that works towards answering questions to move towards protecting animals and keeping our oceans healthy. So that is kind of the best part of my job.
And so important too, yeah. And would you say that discovery is still in its infancy? Ocean discovery, you said 95% is undiscovered, right? Unmapped, unobserved. That's pretty exciting.
It's hugely exciting. We go out on these expeditions and I put all the dots on the map we've been to, and I get back and I'm like, oh my goodness, we've almost been nowhere still. And we've been out for weeks.
Well, this is actually a great segue. It's like we planned it almost. And it's how often do you actually get to go out on these expeditions?
Yeah, well, we've been really lucky. Every year since we started our program, we've been able to do an expedition to one of the seamounts in the offshore, except of course, let's ignore 2020 COVID. But we've been pretty lucky right now to go out annually. We will probably get to continue that, but maybe not into the seamounts or some other areas that we need to collect data in as well. And that's the sponge reefs. But we're allowed, we generally do one large expedition into the offshore every year. And they're about 2 weeks long.
Question from Nadia. What is the biggest species you have found?
The biggest species. Wow. So some of these corals are massive. They're very large. We're not passing any right now, but they can be up to 3 meters tall. But we did see last year when we were out here a salmon shark. And it was very big, and it was swimming along the surface, and it was on its annual migration, and we saw it just out in the middle of nowhere. We're like, what is that? And it was rubbing against the only log that was way out here. And so it was also 2 to 3 meters long. So, and then of course we are lucky enough to probably see whales almost every day out here. They're huge. We are looking very closely. The blue whales are out in this area as well, and we have not seen one of those, but I've made sure the bridge knows that we really would like to.
Thank you. And actually, that's a great question as well. What is the most common animal you see?
Well, today, right now, which we're kind of far off the bottom right now, but all of those brittle stars, they're actually pretty common. We do see them almost at all depths and everywhere. We also see a lot of different kinds of sponges. We see a lot of sponges. There's a few fish called a grenadier. If you watch our videos at all, you'll see a very large fish. We kind of see them almost on every seamount. Oh, there's a rockfish down here, Sharice is saying. And then sea stars. We do see sea stars everywhere as well. That's a pretty common animal across all these seamounts. But what we're finding is that each different seamounts, there's sort of a grouping of special animals that we don't see everywhere. And so we have a place that's called Spongetopia on Explorer Seamount that is a sponge garden. But just the other side, we named a place called Coraltropolis, which is this beautiful coral garden. And so everywhere we kind of go, there's a unique find for sure.
So would you say that every seamount is unique?
Well, this is the question that Sharice and I have been actually debating a lot this trip. What we're finding is that we're not finding everything to be this similar. So I would say they're all very unique and have something very special about them. But we are learning, hopefully learning that at certain depths, sponges can live and certain heights, corals can live. And so we're trying to figure that out right now. So it's our hope that some are kind of similar, because then as scientists, we would like to try to suggest that if we go to one seamount that's this height, another seamount similar will be the same height, so that we can project our data across. There are 65 seamounts in the offshore here. And so far, we've been to probably just under 20 of them. And I think they've all been quite unique so far. So Sharice and I are going to have a hard job of projecting our data across.
All right, I have one more question here before we take a break. Are there any deep sea vents or active volcanoes in the protected area?
Yes, there are definitely deep sea vents in this area. So they're hydrothermal vents. And so right across the middle of this offshore area here is the known actual marine protected area. It's called Endeavour. And it's a marine protected area that has many vents within it. And they're all kind of along our fault lines. So where our plates meet, there's quite a few vents. But I will also say, once we switch gears and start talking about hydrothermal vents, there'll be a large, we could end up finding more hydrothermal vents than we know are there right now as well. We don't have the camera equipment or the camera that can reach them. The boots can only go to 2100, and most of those are deeper than 2100. And there are no active volcanoes in this offshore region.
Okay, we're just going to take a short break for our final slides. And for those who can stay on a little bit longer and ask more questions, please do so. All right.
Alrighty. Well, and a big thank you to everybody who joined us today, and we've learned so much. So again, just a big thank you to all these folks: Departments of Fisheries and Ocean, Council of the Haida Nation, New Chalmers Tribal Council, and Ocean Networks Canada. And of course, it goes kind of without saying, but we want to say it. We want to thank the entire crew of the JP Tully and the Canadian Coast Guard as well. They're keeping these lovely folks safe out at sea.
Fantastic. So to continue following this expedition, you can follow the hashtag Pacific Seamounts 2021. You can also follow the live stream at oceannetworks.ca, Pacific Seamounts 2021. And you can continue asking questions of Tammy and Sharice using Slido. And we'll put those links into the chat right now.
Excellent. And if you're interested in connecting with other ocean expeditions, including the next Ocean Networks Canada expedition, you can register at nautiluslive.org/education/Ship2Shore interactions. That'll also go into the chat because I know it's a bit of a long one. All those interactions are free. And just like here, you can watch what they're doing as they go out to sea and help us on the Ocean Networks Canada network.
Okay, and so for those who can stay online a little bit longer to ask questions, let's go back to Sharice and Tammy now. And for everyone else, many thanks for joining us today, and take care. All right, Sharice and Tammy, let's see our questions here. First question is, how do you waterproof boots?
Oh my goodness. I need Ben right now. How do we waterproof boots? Okay, so that's pretty much okay. That's what I was going to say. We put all electronics into actual containers that don't leak, is what the team told me over here. Most of the equipment we buy is already all very waterproof and pressure tested, and so it's all very compartmentalized. But the challenge is putting it at depth and pressure. As you put it deeper, the ocean squishes it, and keeping things from squishing down there is actually quite a science. We have the brains of the boots, and inside the brains are inside this large can, looks like a big can, and the walls are really, really thick. They're like really thick, and that is what's keeping the computer components down there safe. Then there's also another set of brains, I call it second brains, and it's full of oil, and so when it compresses, the oil sort of protects everything, and it's all in a waterproof housing, which is actually filled with oil.
I feel like I would be much more useful with a second brain. I think I would get more done. Actually, there's another question here. How did the Coast Guard become involved in this research project? So why them?
Well, so the Coast Guard is the Fisheries and Oceans and the Canadian Coast Guard are partner agencies. And so to do research when you are a Government of Canada employee is you get time on Coast Guard ships to do science. So there are actually specific science ships. So this JP Tully does science all year round. And so there's different scientists who use it for it's almost 2-week intervals all year. There's a few other science ships in the Coast Guard as well that we use. And then the Coast Guard has its Coast Guards for search and rescue ships, and also has Coast Guard ships that work on supplying the lighthouses and setting up navigation buoys. There's all kinds of different Coast Guard activities.
Here's another question. What can I do to help protect seamounts?
Well, I mean, first of all, the sad thing, we have been finding a lot of garbage in the ocean. And so on one dive, if we find 1 or 2 pieces of garbage, if you think about our dives are short and don't cover very much, it's pretty important to control our litter. And I would also say control our plastic usage because, it lasts a long time. And we did just see a plastic bag. So I believe that we have to just be as conscious as we can about our uses of our garbage. And then there's also climate change. There's a larger story to this about how climate change is affecting the animals down here and their ability. The animals that can't move, like sponges and corals, are going to be affected by the climate change because they can't move to different areas to find more oxygen. And so we just have to be conscious of our choices.
Here's another one. Is it hard to be a marine biologist?
No, it's fun. Is it hard to be marine? I don't believe so. I mean, you go through, you finish your high school, and then you go to university, or you go and take courses, and then you end up falling in love with something, and then you follow your dreams. So I would say almost everybody on the ship has sort of followed their dream of their goals to work on the ocean, has led them to different areas of the research or opportunities. And so Shreese has gone on to do graduate degrees and has her PhD in marine biology. I did my undergrad degree at University of Victoria and just really loved working on the ocean, and I really love scuba diving. And my first jobs were all scuba diving in the north coast and central coast of BC, working with the local First Nations communities up there. So there's lots of different marine biology jobs out there. So if you're really interested, follow your dreams and you'll get there.
Okay, we have no more questions from the Q&A, but I have a question for you. What is the most interesting behavior that you have witnessed with boots? Or not, it doesn't have to be with boots, but while you've been at sea observing critters.
Yeah, and again, I'm going to come to the skateboarding shark was by far the most interesting, crazy one. We call it skateboarding shark because he was really riding the rail of that log, as I was mentioning earlier. That is a rare sighting to see, a strange behavior. And he didn't really care that there was a boat right beside him. He needed to rub the log, which we figured he was rubbing himself to get rid of parasites. So we've seen that behavior, but we also see other smaller behaviors with the sea stars. One other thing that happened in 2017 when we came out, there was something called a pyrosome bloom. So it's a planktonic tunicate that was floating, and there were so many of them. If you would remember this stuff, I kind of explained it. They landed on the beach. They looked like clear tubes. They were everywhere. But what they did is they fell to the bottom of the ocean, and they landed in the mouths of things that couldn't move. So we'd see anemones, which is, we all know anemone is a little circular thing you see on a beach that's a little tube with a mouth. They were like sucking these pyrosomes down the middle of them. So it was kind of interesting to see this feeding frenzy of pyrosomes. I think that's those two I can think of right now.
Great, thank you. All right, I think we have, I have a feeling our questions have been completed. Does anybody on our panel want to say anything at this point? Please feel free. Oh, that's really cool. What is that behind you? Oh, those are sea stars?
Oh yeah, they zoomed in on the brittle stars. There you go. That's all brittle stars. The brittle stars are tiny.
What? So are they, is it true that they are the most abundant of the echinoderms?
Looking at this picture, I'd say yes.
So
yeah, they're everywhere.
Well, what about the sea star wasting disease? Have you seen this we've seen it on our coastline. Anybody who visits the coastline has, over the last, 5 or so years, has seen that. Have you seen any of that on the seamounts, the sea star wasting disease?
We have not seen that. And most of the species that you see, most of the species that we've seen that have been affected by sea star wasting disease, we're not seeing on these seamounts. These are more deep water sea stars. And again, skunk kingless bowie would be the only one that would have shallow enough locations. And when we were there in 2018, we did not see any of the sea star wasting disease. We kind of talk about seamounts as sort of an island away from the continental slope, or away from the shoreline, where animals have a refugia to get away from the influences of the inshore waters. So maybe they didn't expect it.
Well, that's good to hear, because I can tell you that sea star wasting disease is kind of creepy. So I'm glad to hear that they're not being affected. And there's a really great question actually in the that's come in related to that, and it says, is there plans to do any long-term observations of a single seamount, either in the future?
So right now we're at, the answer is yes. So right now we're at the stage of planning how we're going to look at our marine protected areas. But I can tell you right now that skunk kingless bowie is one of our most studied seamounts, and we will continually go back there and study that seamount as part of that marine protected area. And we just actually returned to Delwood Seamount on this survey a couple days ago, and that's our third visit to that seamount as well. So we're getting a few that we're getting repeated visits to. And so, yeah, there will be, as we develop our monitoring plan and monitoring strategy, we will definitely be visiting a few of the seamounts as we plan what we're doing.
Thank you very much. That's exciting. Hopefully we'll be along for the journey as well.
All right, I think we're all complete with our questions. And I'm just going to share our last slide with everyone and thank everyone for joining today. It's been amazing. I've personally learned a lot from this, and I want to thank you very much. Monica.
Yeah, this has just been absolutely fantastic. The questions have really inspired me as well to pursue different things. And of course, if you are inspired to ask more questions just after this broadcast, be sure to ask them on the Slido, and Charisse and Tammy will do their best to answer them. We wish everyone a fantastic summer, and thank you for joining us.